My name is Madison Clark, and I turned 80 in April. I've always believed that growing old gracefully meant learning to accept life's quiet fade into the background, your name spoken less often, your needs suddenly optional. But nothing prepares you for how fast the world forgets you. Or worse, how fast your own blood does. 5 years ago, I lost the love of my life. Albert. My Albert. We were married for 52 years, and still, I sometimes wake up at 2 a.m. reaching for his hand, my palm closing around empty sheets that should have been warm with him. The ache never really goes away. You just learn to dress it up in polite smiles and morning routines. Albert was the reason this house breathes the way it does. We built it together when we were just two dreamers with calloused hands and nowhere else to be but with each other. Every wall, every creak in the floorboards, every squeaky step on the staircase carries his fingerprints. After he passed, the house didn't feel empty, it felt alive, because his love still lived here. That house, my sanctuary, my past, my final chapter. Nathan, our only child, was the miracle that came 10 years after we stopped hoping. He had Albert's eyes and my chin, but from an early age he seemed older than both of us combined. Bright, calculated, always 3 steps ahead. We raised him to be independent, to value hard work, and maybe, if I'm being honest, we praised him too much, forgave him too easily. For a while, he was the sun my world revolved around. But lately, something had changed in him. Something I couldn't quite name at first. It started slowly. A shift in his voice. A certain tightness around his smile when he visited. His compliments became veiled criticisms. "You still living here all by yourself, Mom? That's impressive," or "You really shouldn't be doing yard work at your age." I brushed it off, like you do when you don't want to believe what your gut is whispering. I thought maybe he was stressed. His job in finance demanded long hours, and his wife, Tessa, was always involved in this gala or that fundraiser. They were busy people. I told myself that over and over again. I hadn't seen my granddaughter, Chloe, in nearly 6 months. The last time she visited, she spent the whole time on her phone. I offered to make her grilled cheese the way she liked it, extra butter on the pan, no crust, and she barely looked up. "I'm vegan now," she said, like I'd offended her. Still, I kept baking cookies. I kept calling. I kept hoping. And then one morning changed everything. It was a Wednesday, mid-April. The daffodils had just bloomed around the porch. The sun had a gentle warmth to it, and the world felt, if only for a brief moment, kind. I remember the feel of the garden gloves on my fingers, the smell of wet soil, the way the robins sang in the old oak above. I had just finished deadheading the roses when the dizziness struck. Sudden, violent. The trowel slipped from my hand. My knees buckled. Then darkness. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Hooked up to wires, cold air pumping through the vents, a nurse with kind eyes leaning over me. "Mrs. Clark, you're awake," she said softly. "You gave us quite a scare." "What happened?" My voice sounded like paper. "You fainted in your garden. Your neighbor found you. You were lucky." I blinked slowly. Everything felt distant, foggy. "My pills," I whispered. She nodded gently. "It appears you accidentally doubled your blood pressure medication. It caused your blood pressure to crash." "No," I said too fast. "No, I organize my pills every Sunday night. I never forget." The nurse didn't argue. She just patted my arm and made a note on her clipboard. I lay there for 2 days, waiting. Nathan didn't come. The man I brought into this world with my own 2 hands, who I fed, clothed, loved, and fought for, couldn't be bothered to show up. Not the first day. Not the second. Tessa sent a single text. "Hope you're recovering well. Nathan is tied up with a merger. We'll visit as soon as we can." On the third day, I received a fruit basket. Bananas already browning. Apples mealy. No note. On the fourth day, Nathan walked in wearing a suit that probably cost more than Albert's first car. He looked fresh-pressed, immaculate, every bit the high-powered executive he'd grown into. "Mom," he said, leaning down to kiss my forehead. "You scared us." I studied his face. No fear. No remorse. Just a tight-lipped smile and a flick of his eyes to the monitor beside me. You really need to be more careful with your medication, he added, as if I'd misplaced a sock. I didn't mix them up, I replied quietly. Of course, he said, brushing it off. But maybe it's time to think about some support. Someone to check in, you know? Maybe sell the house, get something easier to manage. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. My house? I asked, almost choking on the words. Just a thought, he replied, too quickly. I mean, you've been alone for 5 years. It's a big place. I said nothing. He left 20 minutes later, promising to check in more often. He did not. 2 weeks later, after I had come home and the bruises from the IVs were just beginning to fade, a letter arrived. Plain envelope. County seal. I opened it at the kitchen table. It was raining outside. The letter said the deed to my home had been successfully transferred. The house, my house, was no longer mine. It belonged to Nathan Benjamin Clark. I read the words again and again. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember the sound of the chair falling behind me. I only remember clutching the counter for balance and whispering Albert's name. My son, my own flesh and blood. Pain has a rhythm in hospitals. It doesn't arrive all at once. It hums, pulses, lingers. It becomes part of the air, a quiet second heartbeat to everything. They moved me to a long-term care wing 3 days after I collapsed. My condition had worsened. Complications, they said. An infection. My kidneys weren't happy. My blood pressure was like a faulty faucet, high 1 hour, dangerously low the next. The treatment was intense. Daily blood draws. Antibiotics that burned going in. Catheters. Machines beeping and blinking in a language only nurses seemed to understand. There were moments when I thought, this is it. This is how I go. And yet somehow I kept waking up. The days were a blur of fluorescent lights, scratchy gowns, and the steady parade of caregivers. And in the quiet hours between medication rounds and shift changes, I waited. I waited for my son. But he didn't come. He didn't come when they wheeled me to imaging with tremors in my hands. He didn't come when I signed paperwork I didn't fully understand, my reading glasses forgotten on the kitchen counter at home. He didn't come when the specialist delivered the news, a lesion on my lung that deserved monitoring. And still I waited. Like a fool. Like a mother. The nurses became my family. Lila was the first to make me laugh, really laugh, in weeks. She was young, maybe 30, with a red ponytail and laugh lines she hadn't earned yet. She'd sing while checking my vitals, her voice sweet and off-key. You've got the lowest resting heart rate in this wing, Mrs. Clark, she said one morning, adjusting my cuff. Either you're super healthy or secretly a monk. I'm just slow, I said. Slow to wake up. Slow to realize when I'm no longer wanted. Lila blinked, her smile faltering. Hey, she said gently. You're wanted here. We look forward to seeing your name on the chart. That night, she brought me a blanket from the staff lounge. Soft, clean, smelled like lavender. You looked cold, she said, tucking it under my arms. And then there was Jose, the night nurse. Quiet, kind-eyed. He'd stop by at 3 a.m. when the pain meds wore off and the ghosts crept in. Can I sit? He'd ask, pulling up a chair. He didn't talk much. Just held my hand and let me cry in silence. One evening, during a dressing change that left me gasping, he looked at me and asked the question they all wanted to ask. Do you have any family, Mrs. Clark? The question stung. I nodded, blinking away tears. I have a son. Jose didn't press. But later, he placed a note on my tray. You deserve more than silence. The words broke me. I wept in the dark, my shoulders shaking, mouth pressed to the pillow so no one would hear. I wept for the house I'd built, for the man I'd lost, for the son who once called me his favorite person and now couldn't be bothered to show up. A few days later, Miriam came on shift, older than the others, stern but tender. The kind of nurse who'd been through everything and still remembered to call you baby. She brought me applesauce when the hospital food made me gag. She braided my thinning gray hair because I deserved to feel pretty. On her third visit, she sat beside me and asked, "Why hasn't your boy been by, Madison?" Her voice wasn't accusatory, just sad, curious, protective. I don't know, I whispered. I raised him with everything I had. I never missed a school play. I held him through every fever, paid for his college, helped him buy his first car. My throat closed. I loved him more than I knew how to love myself. Miriam took my hand in both of hers, warm and firm. And he left you, she said softly. I must have done something wrong, I murmured. I just don't know what. No, honey. She squeezed my hand. You did everything right. That boy's heart is the one that got lost, not yours. I looked at the window. Outside, the sun was rising again. Another day he wouldn't come. The nurses kept showing up, though. They fluffed pillows and listened to my stories. They remembered how I liked my tea one sugar, no cream. They treated me like I mattered. And every kindness made the absence sharper, because strangers were loving me better than my own son ever had. Lying in that hospital bed, the minutes and hours stretched endlessly into each other. I found myself doing the one thing I tried not to, remembering. The past is a dangerous place for a mother with regrets. Once upon a time, we were a family. Not perfect, but real. Intact. Whole. Nathan was the kind of child who made motherhood feel like a blessing. He was bright, thoughtful, and gentle. His imagination was vast. He dreamed in color, in wild, impossible shapes. When he was 7, he wanted to be a marine biologist. By 10, an astronaut. By 12, a writer. His dreams shifted like clouds, but the light behind them never dimmed. But Albert, his father, wanted something else. Albert was a man of structure, a man who believed in status, in legacy, in doing what was expected. He'd grown up with nothing and clawed his way into success through sheer will and unrelenting control. He didn't dream, he executed. So when Nathan, at 13, told us he wanted to attend the arts-focused high school across town, the one with the creative writing program, the one where he could finally be himself, I saw the spark in his eyes. That rare glimmer of joy he reserved for his biggest dreams. But Albert shut it down. No son of mine is wasting his education scribbling poems, he said flatly. You're going to Franklin Academy. End of discussion. Franklin Academy. Prestigious. Rigid. A pipeline to Ivy League schools, full of tailored uniforms and silent hallways. It was everything Nathan wasn't. He begged. He cried. He told me that he'd never fit in there, that it would crush him. I can't be who he wants me to be, he whispered one night, sitting on the edge of his bed, shoulders trembling. Why won't you say anything? I tried. Oh God, I tried. That night, after Nathan had finally fallen asleep, I sat across from Albert in the living room, clutching a mug of cold tea. He's miserable, I said. He wants something different. Albert didn't look up. He wants fantasy. He'll thank me later when he's not waiting tables with an English degree. But you're not hearing him. He's begging us to. I'm not raising a dreamer, Albert snapped. I'm raising a man. I argued until I cried. I pleaded. I even threatened to pull Nathan out of the enrollment myself. Albert responded by leaving the room. Discussion over. And so, Nathan went to Franklin. Every day, he woke up a little smaller. He stopped painting. He stopped writing. He started getting headaches. And Albert insisted it was just the adjustment phase. Then came the clubs. Model UN, robotics. Debate team. Good for the resume, Albert said, pushing sign-up forms across the dinner table. Nathan didn't want to join. He wanted to spend his weekends building things in the garage, reading sci-fi novels, composing stories about imaginary planets. Instead, he spent them in stiff blazers giving speeches he didn't believe in to people who didn't see him. The worst part? He thought I agreed with it all. He thought I stood beside Albert, nodding silently while his dreams were scraped away and replaced with bullet points on a college application. He thought I chose his father over him, but I didn't. What he never saw, what he'll probably never know, was how I tried to be a shield in ways too small for a child to recognize. I stayed up late to read the stories he wrote in secret. I snuck him sketch pads when Albert wasn't looking. I wrote notes of encouragement and slipped them into his notebooks. I believe in you, I'd scrawl in the corner of a page. Don't stop dreaming. But my whispers of support were no match for Albert's booming demands. And as the years passed, Nathan stopped talking to me about his passions. He stopped sharing. He stopped looking me in the eye. I remember one night, just after he turned 17, I found him alone in the backyard, staring up at the stars. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, with a bitterness that chilled me, he said, "I know you think he's right." I opened my mouth, but no words came. "He doesn't see me," he continued. "But you're supposed to. And you don't say anything." I wanted to scream, "I do see you. I see everything. I'm fighting for you every day in the quiet." But instead, I just stood there, heart cracking in my chest, and watched my son turn away. That was the moment I began to lose him. And now, years later, as I lay in this hospital bed, my name ripped from the deed to my home, my son absent, unreachable, I think back to that boy under the stars. He thought I chose his father. But the truth is, I just didn't know how to stop Albert without breaking everything. And I never dreamed Nathan would hate me for trying to hold us together. They say time heals all wounds. But what no one tells you is that some wounds don't scab. They don't scar. They stay raw. They pulse. They whisper. And worst of all, they pretend to be invisible to everyone but you. After Albert passed, I told myself that Nathan and I would have a chance to begin again. Without Albert's heavy presence looming over every conversation, I thought maybe, just maybe, my son and I could finally speak to each other plainly. Not as figures arranged around a man's shadow, but as mother and son. Human. Soft. Forgiving. I wanted a second chance. The funeral was quiet. Nathan gave a eulogy that was measured, dignified, full of praise for his father's legacy. I watched him stand behind the pulpit, tall and composed, the image of Albert in both posture and tone. He didn't cry. He didn't tremble. I did, quietly, into my handkerchief, hidden behind dark glasses. That evening, Nathan stayed the night. We sat on the front porch under a pale moon. I made chamomile tea. He took a sip, then set it aside. Too bitter, probably. "Thanks for everything you did for Dad," he said suddenly, his voice low, almost cautious. I looked at him, blinking. I loved him. We both did, in our own ways. He nodded slowly, then looked out over the lawn. "I think he respected you more than he ever said," Nathan added. I almost said, "And what about you?" But I was too afraid of the answer. Instead, I just nodded. And so began the long, quiet unraveling. For the next year, I tried with everything I had to keep him close. I cooked meals from his childhood, pot roast, chicken and dumplings, the cinnamon rolls he used to sneak from the oven when they were still too hot. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, polished the good silver, lit candles before every dinner. I wanted him to see that I was still me, still his mom. He came a few times, always dressed sharply, always checking his watch. He brought Tessa, who smiled too much and glanced around the house like it was a museum of someone she pitied. She complimented the curtains, the pie, my earrings. But she never once looked me in the eyes long enough for a conversation to settle. Chloe came once. She sat at the table with her earbuds in, texting furiously. I offered her lemonade, freshly squeezed, no pulp, the way she used to love, and she barely glanced up. "I'm vegan now," she said, before returning to her phone. I tried to laugh it off. "Oh, I didn't know. I'll make something special next time." "There probably won't be a next time," she muttered, and I pretended I didn't hear. Nathan said little during those visits, asked no questions, shared no details about his life, just small talk and silence. The man who used to curl up next to me while I read him bedtime stories now sat on the edge of my sofa like a guest at a dull event. And then the visit stopped altogether. I called, left voicemails, texted articles I thought he'd like. Birthdays passed. Holidays came and went. Once, on my birthday, I baked myself a cake just in case he stopped by. He didn't. 2 days later, a bouquet arrived. No card. When I asked if they were from him, he texted back, "Hope they were nice. Been slammed at work. Happy belated." My heart sank. It wasn't even a voice, just letters on a screen. Lifeless. But what wounded me deeper was how he still spoke of Albert, as if nothing had happened. He would quote his father's advice during our brief conversations. Dad always said to take risks early. Dad knew how to handle tough decisions. Dad wouldn't have let emotions get in the way. Never a word about how Albert pressured him into clubs he hated. Never a mention of the time Albert mocked his art portfolio and threw it in the trash. Never a flicker of acknowledgement that his father's silence had been more damaging than any raised voice. No, Albert was untouchable. But me? He punished me. I don't know if he knew it, if he did it consciously, or if it was some twisted grief turned sour. But the colder he got, the more I felt I was paying for a debt I never owed. He blamed me for standing beside his father. He never saw the way I tried to shield him. He never knew I stayed up late comforting the child Albert ignored, that I advocated behind closed doors, that I watered his dreams in whispers when they were too fragile to bloom in daylight. And when I became older, slower, more fragile, when the arthritis made stairs difficult and my eyesight dimmed, he didn't step in. He didn't offer to visit. Didn't ask if I needed help. Once, when I asked if he could fix a leaky pipe in the guest bathroom, he said, "You should just hire someone, Mom. It's not like I live next door." And that was that. Every request for connection was met with inconvenience. Every offer to reconnect was deflected. It was easier for him to resent me than to remember the truth. And I fool that I was kept trying, kept hoping, kept setting a place at the table, until one day I realized I was no longer his mother. I had become a name on his calendar, an obligation, an asset. And I didn't know what broke me more, that he stopped loving me, or that I still loved him with everything I had left. The loneliness was different now. Not the kind you feel when no one calls or visits. Not the type you drown with old photo albums and teacups set out for people who never arrive. This was deeper. It was the kind of loneliness that comes from knowing you've been erased while you're still alive. It had been 18 days since I was admitted to the hospital. 18 days since the fall. 18 days since I opened my eyes in a white, sterile room, praying I'd see Nathan's face walk through the door. But he never came. Not on the first day. Not on the third. Not even after they discovered the infection in my lungs and started the heavy antibiotics. I called once, maybe twice. He answered the first time, his voice clipped, distracted. "I'm swamped, Mom. Tessa's juggling Chloe's schedule, and I've got 2 back-to-back contracts coming in. I just can't get away right now." I'd smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "That's okay, sweetheart. I just wanted to hear your voice." "You'll be fine," he said. "You're always fine." Then he hung up. That was the last I heard from him, for over a week. Still, I kept trying to make sense of it. I rehearsed his excuses in my head, as if each one could soften the ache. He's busy. He's overwhelmed. He doesn't want to see me so weak. Maybe it's too painful for him. I clung to those ideas like they were life preservers. Because the alternative, that he simply didn't care, was too brutal to hold. Until my phone rang on the 18th day. I answered immediately, hopeful, my voice hoarse but eager. "Hello." "Madison," came the voice of my neighbor, Mrs. Dalton. Her voice sounded tight, confused. "Yes, it's me. Is everything all right?" There was a pause on the line. "Too long. Where are you right now?" My stomach clenched. "I'm still at St. Mary's," I said slowly. "Why?" Another pause. "Well, I just saw your son." I sat straighter in bed, heart thudding. "Nathan." "Yes." "At your house." He was on the front porch a few minutes ago, rattling the doorknob. Looked like he was trying to get in. My blood went cold. "He doesn't have a key," I whispered. That's what I thought. He looked frustrated, kept pacing. Then he made a phone call and disappeared around the side. I figured maybe you were inside and didn't hear him, but now you're telling me he didn't even tell you he was going. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. He was at my house. He didn't have keys. He hadn't told me he was going. He didn't call, didn't ask, didn't even mention it during our last conversation, when I had begged him, gently, to come visit me. When I had said, "I miss you." When I had asked if he was planning to stop by. He told me he was too busy. Too busy to come to the hospital, but not too busy to go to my home. Alone. Uninvited. Without a key. My hands shook as I ended the call. The phone slipped from my fingers and hit the blankets with a dull thud. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind, colliding into each other like a car crash. What was he doing there? Why didn't he tell me? Why now, after so long? Why not bring Chloe or Tessa or even call ahead? Why the back door? Why no key? Unless. Unless he didn't want me to know. Unless he thought I wouldn't be home. Unless he assumed no, counted on the fact that I wouldn't answer the door. Because he knew exactly where I was. I stared out the hospital window. The sun was setting. A pink glow bathed the city, soft and sad. And in that light, something inside me broke. The fragile trust one had been nurturing like a dying plant. It snapped. I'd spent the last several weeks making excuses for him. Months even. Years. I had chalked up his absence to exhaustion, his coldness to grief, his avoidance to emotional wounds he didn't know how to name. But now I saw it for what it was. He didn't come to the hospital because he didn't care. He went to my house because he wanted something from me, and he didn't think I'd be in the way. I picked up the phone and called him. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Straight to voicemail. I hung up. Then I texted, "Mrs. Dalton told me you were at the house today. Is everything all right?" Read. 3:16 p.m. No reply. I stared at the screen, at the little check mark that told me he saw it, that he knew I knew, and still, he said nothing. Not even a lie. Not even a cover story. That silence said everything. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating. I pressed the call button and asked the nurse for more water, but my voice was shaking so hard she looked at me like I'd fractured something new. When she left, I clutched the edge of the blanket and wept. But this wasn't the quiet, helpless sobbing of grief. This was the deep, hollow cry of betrayal. The realization that your child, the one you nursed, loved, protected, has stopped seeing you as someone to love and instead started seeing you as something to take. That was the night I began to unravel the truth. And I knew, somewhere deep inside, that whatever he was doing at that house, it wasn't just a visit. Something about the way they looked at me changed. The doctors, the nurses, even the volunteers who brought trays of food I could barely taste. Their voices softened just a little too much. Their questions came with careful spacing, as if I were a child trying to count to 10 for the first time. "How are we feeling today, Madison? Do you know where you are? Can you tell me what day it is?" I answered each one crisply. I knew exactly what day it was, where I was, and why I was there. I wasn't confused, I was paying attention. It started after they reviewed the toxicology report, the medication error. They said I had taken double the dosage of my blood pressure pills, lisinopril, a whole extra dose. It had dropped my pressure so low I fainted, collapsed, and was found hours later by a neighbor who noticed the paper hadn't been collected from my porch. The problem was, I didn't make that mistake. I remember that morning vividly. I always took my pills with grapefruit juice, always set them out the night before, double-checking the little compartments in my day-by-day pill box. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, hearing the birds through the window, counting out my meds like I always did. I didn't mix anything up. I know I didn't. But now they were looking at me like maybe I had. And then they started asking questions. Carefully. Casually. Like they were making conversation, not taking notes. Do you live alone? Have you ever forgotten to take medication before? Is there anyone who helps you manage your prescriptions? I manage them myself, I told them. And I've never had a problem. Not in 10 years. They smiled, nodded, made notes. But I could feel it, doubt, creeping in like fog through a broken window. It made no sense. Not until Nathan came. He walked in like he was doing me a favor. Crisp shirt, clean shaven, holding a single-use coffee cup like he was on a break between meetings. He kissed my cheek, brief and impersonal, and sat beside me like he had somewhere else to be. "Sorry it took me so long," he said. "Things have been crazy." I said nothing. He looked around, tapping his fingers against the arm of the chair. "Place isn't bad. You've got a window at least." "I asked you to come," I said quietly. 2 weeks ago. He shifted, clearly uncomfortable. "I know. I've been buried." I waited for something more. An apology. A smile. A sign of guilt. There was none. He leaned in then, voice a little softer, eyes scanning my face. "Listen, Mom. I've been talking with the doctors. They're concerned. Honestly, I think it's best if you don't rush to leave. Why? He hesitated. You've had some confusion. It's not a big deal, but we want to be careful. It's safer here for now. I stared at him. I wasn't confused. Mom, I know what I took. I know when I took it. I didn't make a mistake. He paused. Just a second too long. Then, maybe not. But the doctors think this wasn't the first time. That's not true. He looked at me like I was a toddler insisting the sky was green. I told them you've had trouble remembering lately. You said you lost your car keys last month. You forgot Chloe's birthday. Remember? I remembered. I remembered that I had mailed Chloe a card a day early because I wanted it to arrive before her birthday, not after. He never told me whether she even got it. I remembered the keys falling behind the toaster oven. I found them an hour later and told him as a joke. He'd turned it into a symptom. Nathan stood up, smoothed his shirt. Let's just keep things simple, okay? You rest here. Let the doctors help. I'll check in. I nodded slowly, but inside, everything screamed. Because he was building a case. He wasn't here to help. He was here to confirm a story. The story where I was declining, where I couldn't be trusted, where the house, my home, needed to be managed by someone capable. And then he did the unthinkable. He stepped out into the hallway, just outside my door. I could still hear him, even though he spoke in that calm, professional tone he used in meetings. She's getting worse, he said. Confuses her meds, forgets details. I've been trying to keep an eye on her, but I think it's time we start planning long-term care. My chest tightened. My fists clenched under the covers. How dare he? How dare he? I wasn't confused. I wasn't forgetful. I was betrayed. And suddenly, everything snapped into focus. The visit to the house while I was hospitalized. The missing keys. The shift in the staff's tone. He was setting the stage, trying to take what was mine while making sure no one questioned it. And worst of all, he did it with a smile. When he returned to the room, I looked up at him. I gave him the softest, sweetest smile I could muster. You're right, I said gently. I should rest. His eyes relaxed. Exactly. We're just looking out for you. He left soon after. Said he had to run to another meeting. Promised to stop by again soon. I watched the door close behind him, the air heavy with everything he didn't say. And then I turned my head toward the window. Outside, the world was moving on without me. But inside, I made a promise to myself. You're not going to win, Nathan. Not like this. I didn't sleep that night. Not a single minute. The machines beeped beside me with dull, mechanical indifference, measuring the steady rhythm of a heart that was anything but calm. My body remained in the hospital, but my mind wandered every creaking floorboard of my house. The house I had built a life in. The house I had raised Nathan in. The house I had fought to preserve after Albert passed, refusing to let it be sold or repurposed like a worn-out piece of furniture. And now I couldn't stop thinking about what Nathan had done or what he might be doing. When I closed my eyes, I saw him in my kitchen. Not as a son bringing soup to his mother, but as a stranger rooting through drawers, opening file cabinets, sliding his fingers along the edge of my will, my bank records, my deed. That smile he wore when he visited me, the one I had tried so hard to interpret as love, it had never reached his eyes. And then there were the pills. At first, I didn't want to believe it. Not Nathan. Not my boy. He was distant, yes. Cold. Maybe even opportunistic. But to harm me? To tamper with my medication? It sounded like a crime in a true crime podcast. Not something your own flesh and blood would do. But the evidence kept crawling back like a shadow that wouldn't leave. I never miscounted my pills. I checked them nightly like a ritual. The container had been full, not tampered with, until the week before my fall. I remembered, clear as crystal, the exact pill I had swallowed that morning. It looked wrong, slightly off, a little duller. I thought maybe it was just the lighting. And the toxicology report showed double the dosage in my blood. There was no pharmacy error, no accident, no confusion. Someone had wanted me incapacitated. And the only person who had access to my home in the days leading up to that event, besides me, was Nathan. The nausea that rose in me was worse than any physical illness. It was grief, not for death, but for betrayal. The slow, choking grief that comes from realizing the child you'd give your life for sees you as an obstacle. He didn't visit me out of concern. He visited to confirm that I was no longer a threat. He wanted me still, quiet, in a room where people wore name tags and asked me what year it was. So he could do what? What was so important that he had to get me out of the way? I had to know. I couldn't lie in that bed another day, wondering if he was walking through my front door with a forged signature, or meeting with a lawyer, or tearing through decades of memories in search of a profit. The house wasn't just property, it was mine. It held Albert's voice echoing in the hallway, the height chart on the pantry door from when Nathan was little, the porch swing he built me for our anniversary. It held my grief, my laughter, my entire identity. I refused to let it be stolen from me under the guise of protection. So I did what any old woman with nothing left to lose would do. I called my neighbor. Mrs. Dalton was 81 and had the spirit of a retired detective. She'd lived across the street from me for over 20 years. We'd shared casseroles and Christmas lights, gossip, and grief. She picked up on the second ring. Madison, I need your help, I said. She could hear it in my voice. The shake, the steel. I'm listening. I need you to watch my house. Is someone there? Not yet, but I think Nathan's coming back. And I need to know when he does, who he's with, what he's doing, anything out of the ordinary. There was a pause. Then, you think he's after something. I know he is. I'll get my notebook, she said without missing a beat. I'm serious, Vivian. I don't think this is just about snooping. I think he tampered with my medication. I think he wanted me out of the house. Mrs. Dalton gasped. No, your own son. Yes. She was quiet for a long moment. You poor thing. I don't want pity. I want the truth. You'll get it. I need to know what he's doing in there, Vivian. If there are papers being delivered. If people come and go. If he brings someone inside. A realtor. A lawyer. Anything. You'll know, she said firmly. I'll be watching every damn move. Binoculars and all. I thanked her with a voice that cracked halfway through. After I hung up, I sank back into the stiff hospital mattress and stared at the ceiling. I had never felt so powerless. Or so determined. I didn't know what Nathan was planning, but I knew he wasn't finished. And neither was I. The word discharge should have been a blessing. A reprieve. A return to something familiar, to the four walls that had held my life like a well-worn book. But when the nurse told me I'd be going home soon, I didn't feel joy. I felt fear. I smiled, of course, thanked her, nodded like a good patient. But inside, something clutched at my chest and refused to let go. Because I knew home wasn't the same place I'd left. And someone had been inside it, moving things, whispering to strangers, making plans. I was being discharged into a house that no longer felt like mine. Nathan had become more attentive over the past week, but not in the way a son should be. His concern had a strange edge to it, like he was checking items off a list rather than checking in on me. He started calling every day, always brief, always pointed. Hey, Mom, did you keep the mortgage documents in the upstairs closet or the downstairs cabinet? I remember you used to keep all your old tax returns in a filing box. What color was that box again? You said something about a will, right? Is that stored with your banking paperwork? At first, I told myself he was trying to help. That maybe, just maybe, he had realized how much he distanced himself and was now trying to step up. But the questions kept coming, faster, sharper. He never asked how I was feeling. He never asked when I'd be home. He only wanted to know where things were. Things like legal documents, proofs of ownership, passwords. It was no longer about care. It was about control. And it wasn't subtle. By the third day, his calls had shifted from curious to impatient. I just don't want to have to dig through all your stuff when you get back, he said, laughing in a way that chilled me. You know how cluttered you get. I'm not cluttered, I snapped. I'm organized. You just don't know where to look. There was silence. Then a chuckle. Right. Sorry. I didn't mean anything by it. But he did. I could hear it now, how every word was a slow erosion, a chisel chipping away at my identity. I wasn't being seen as a mother. I was being recast as a liability. And then came the call from Mrs. Dalton. I was staring at the ceiling again, counting the lines in the fluorescent lights, when the phone buzzed in my hand. Her name flashed across the screen like a lifeline. Madison, she said, breathless. It happened again. My pulse quickened. What? He was there this morning. Your son, Nathan. He wasn't alone this time. My stomach sank. Who is he with? A man, maybe late 40s. Suit, briefcase. They spent nearly 40 minutes in the house. I could see them from my upstairs window, walking from room to room. Did they go upstairs? Yes, and into the backyard. Nathan pointed at the shed, then the fence. Then they both stood by the back porch and shook hands. My chest tightened. Vivian, do you think he's selling the house? There was a long pause. I do, she said quietly. Or preparing to. I shut my eyes, pressing the heel of my hand against my forehead. I felt sick. But that's not all, she continued. Yesterday, someone else came. A woman. Younger. Expensive shoes. Clipboard. She stood in the kitchen for a while, looking around like she was imagining where to put the furniture. He showed her my house? It looked like a showing. Nathan wasn't there that time, but she used a key. My mind raced. What kind of key? A realtor's lockbox. I couldn't see. Just that she walked right in like she owned the place. I covered my mouth to keep from crying out. He was showing my house to strangers, while I was still in a hospital bed. He wasn't waiting for me to get better. He was counting on me not coming back. All the pieces fell into place with nauseating clarity. The push to keep me in the hospital, the lies about my memory, the fake concern, the questions about documents. He didn't need my permission. He just needed my absence. And for a while, he had both. I sat there, trembling, my fists clenched so tight I felt my nails digging into my palms. Mrs. Dalton spoke again, her voice softer. Madison, I don't know what your son thinks he's doing, but it's not right. No, I said, my voice barely a whisper. It's not. You coming home soon? I am. Good. Because your house needs you back. No, I whispered again. It needs me to fight for it. Because I knew now, whatever Nathan had started, he thought it was finished. But he had made one mistake. He'd left me alive. Coming home felt like stepping onto a stage where someone had rearranged the set behind my back. Everything was where it should have been, but not how I left it. The curtains were drawn differently. The throw pillows on the sofa were turned to the good side. My favorite mug was sitting in the sink, even though I hadn't touched it in weeks. It was as if someone had worn my life like a coat and hung it back up, hoping I wouldn't notice the stretch in the sleeves. Nathan carried my bag inside and set it down with exaggerated care. He didn't look me in the eye. Take it easy, he said with a plastic smile. No rush. You've been through a lot. I nodded slowly. He offered me my own tea, from my own kitchen, and I declined. I didn't want anything made with hands that had sifted through my drawers without permission. I just need a moment to sit, I said. Of course. He hesitated, then reached into the leather folder he'd brought along. Actually, there's something I wanted to go over with you. Nothing urgent, but might as well look while we're both here. He said it so smoothly, so confidently, as if this were just business between acquaintances, not a conversation between a mother and the child she had once carried in her arms through thunderstorms. He laid the papers on the kitchen table. Crisp, tabbed, labeled. I figured with everything that's happened, he continued, we should get ahead of things. You know, insurance, property stuff. Just making sure it's all lined up. I picked up the first page, then the second, then the third. My hands began to tremble. At first, the language was vague, something about survivorship clauses, joint asset responsibility, transfer mechanisms. But then came the phrasing I couldn't mistake. Quitclaim deed, transfer of ownership, authorized signatory, Madison A., Clark to Nathan W. Clark. He was asking me to give him the house. Now, while I was still alive, while I was still breathing, eating, thinking, and walking through the very halls he wanted to claim for himself. I stared at the place where my name was typed in bold next to a blank signature line. I looked up at him slowly, and I realized that he was watching me not with love, not even with concern, but with expectation, with calculation. He was waiting for me to be grateful, grateful that he had come to help, grateful that he was taking care of things. But he wasn't helping. He wasn't protecting. He was circling me like a vulture, clipboard in hand, waiting for the moment I'd stop flapping my wings. "What is this?" I asked, even though I already knew. He shrugged, casual. "It's just to formalize things. So there aren't any headaches later. You'd still live here, obviously. Nothing changes for you. Except I wouldn't own it anymore." "Well, technically, no. But it's just a title. You said yourself you're not planning on moving." I set the papers down. My fingers were cold, my mouth dry. But inside, something ancient and angry was beginning to boil. "You waited until I got out of the hospital to ask me this?" He blinked. "I thought it would be less stressful." "No," I said, quieter this time. "You waited because you thought I'd be too tired to fight you." He paused. His smile faltered for a split second. "Mom, that's not fair." "Isn't it?" I looked at him long and hard. "You didn't visit for weeks. You told the doctors I was confused. You went through my house while I was lying in a hospital bed. You showed it to strangers. And now you're asking for my signature." His expression hardened. "I was trying to help." "No, Nathan. You were trying to take." The silence that followed felt like the deepest betrayal of all. Because he didn't deny it. He just looked at the papers. I stood slowly, my body weak but my voice steady. "I'm not signing anything." He folded the papers back into the folder, slower now. "Fine. Talk to someone if you want. But don't make this harder than it has to be." I stared at him. "I intend to talk to someone. A lawyer." He exhaled, exasperated. "This is why I was trying to keep things simple." "No," I said again. "You were trying to make it easy for you. But not anymore." He left not long after that. Didn't kiss my cheek. Didn't say goodbye. He just picked up his folder and walked out the door. The moment it closed, I locked it behind him. Then I sat down at my desk with shaking hands and called the number Mrs. Dalton had given me. It rang once, twice. "Hello?" A calm female voice answered. "My name is Madison Clark," I said. "I believe my son is trying to defraud me, and I need legal help." There was a pause. Then the woman replied, "You called the right place." As I gathered the papers from the table, my breath slow and even, I felt something shift. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't confused. I wasn't scared. I wasn't the helpless old woman he thought I was. I was his mother. And I was ready to fight. It was raining when the truth arrived. I remember sitting in the lawyer's office, watching droplets race down the tall window, my hands curled tightly around a cup of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. The walls were lined with books and certificates, things that meant stability, justice, truth. But none of that mattered until I heard what she had to say. "Mrs. Clark," she said softly, "we've reviewed the documents from the county clerk's office." She slid the manila folder across the desk toward me. I hesitated before opening it. A part of me didn't want to see, because seeing would make it real. But I opened it, and there it was. A quitclaim deed with my name, my address, and my forged signature in bold black ink. Filed during my third week in the hospital, right when Nathan had stopped returning my calls. Right when the nurses started asking if I was ever confused about where I lived. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I began to laugh. Not the joyful kind. The broken, bitter kind, the kind you release when you're done begging the world to be fair. "He did it," I whispered. "Yes," the lawyer replied. "He did." My laughter turned to tears. Not just because of what he'd done, but because he did it without flinching, without shame. While I lay alone in a hospital bed, unsure if I'd ever walk again, my own son had walked into an office with papers he'd forged and claimed my home like it was a prize waiting to be plucked from a dying woman's hands. I wiped my cheeks and looked up. "Can we fight this?" She nodded. "Absolutely. We already have. The signature doesn't match your legal documents. You have multiple witnesses, a timeline that supports your hospitalization, and your neighbor's testimony about strangers entering your home." I thought of Mrs. Dalton, crouched at her window with her binoculars and a notepad. She had saved me. She had believed me. We'll file a motion to void the deed, the lawyer said. And we're prepared to bring charges for fraud if you wish. I stared down at the paper again, at that false signature curling like a snake at the bottom of the page. He wanted me gone, I whispered. Not dead, just removed, silenced. Somewhere far away where I couldn't stop him. He thought he'd get away with it. He almost did. There was silence in the room, except for the sound of rain and my slow, steady breathing. I had never felt more hollow, but I had also never felt stronger. I want the title restored, I said, but I don't want the house anymore. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. You're sure? I nodded. I want him to lose what he tried to steal, but I don't want to live in those rooms anymore. I don't want to lie in that bed, wondering if he's outside the door. And I didn't, because the house no longer felt like mine, not because of the paperwork, but because of what had been poisoned there. The trust, the love, the memories I thought were safe. Nathan didn't just steal a deed. He tried to erase me from my own life. But he failed. We filed the paperwork that same week. My signature, my real one, returned what was mine. We filed a restraining order. We contacted the authorities. My lawyers moved quickly, decisively. Nathan never contested it. He knew the game was over. He didn't call. He didn't write. He disappeared into his own silence. And I let him. I sold the house 2 months later. A young family bought it, a kind couple with a little girl and a baby on the way. They painted the porch, planted tulips. I left behind the rocking chair. It had always squeaked, but they didn't seem to mind. I didn't say goodbye to the house. I said goodbye to him. To the son who once held my hand in parking lots, who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares, who made me Mother's Day cards out of construction paper and glue. That boy was gone. And the man he became? I no longer recognized him. I moved to Suska, a quiet town far enough away that the past couldn't follow me. I rented a small cottage with lace curtains and a creaky staircase that reminded me of happier years. No one here knows what happened. They just know me as the lady who likes her tea hot, her books thick, and her mornings quiet. Some nights, I sit by the window and wonder what Nathan tells people now. Does he say I abandoned him? Does he spin a story where he was just trying to help, and I was the ungrateful, bitter mother who made things difficult? Let him, because I have the truth. I have the documents, the lawyers, the silence. And more than that, I have myself, whole, untouched, undefeated. Forgiveness? Maybe one day. But for now, peace is enough. Because I am still here. And he doesn't know where to find me. The past few weeks in Suska felt like a borrowed dream. The mornings were quiet, too quiet sometimes. There was no knock at the door. No phone ringing with demands. Just the slow, deliberate ritual of making tea, watering the plants, and trying to forget that the person she loved most in the world had looked at her life and seen nothing but real estate. But peace never comes without ghosts. Every corner of her rented cottage reminded Madison of what she had lost and what had nearly been taken. Her lawyer had been cautious, thorough, protective in a way her own son had failed to be. I recommend one final step, he said over the phone, his voice steady. We make the property legally inaccessible. Place it in a secure trust, file a statement of title challenge with the county, even create a declaration of revocation on all false documentation. That way, it's untouchable, even if he tries again. Madison agreed. And then she asked him one last question. What if he already has? He sighed. We'll find out soon. The answer came days later, in a yellow envelope stamped with urgency. Inside, the full record of Nathan's actions. He had forged her signature. He had filed the false deed. He had created a shell agreement stating she was of sound mind and willfully transferring property. He hadn't just taken a chance, he had built a betrayal. And the worst part? He hadn't even waited to see if she'd live. That night, Madison sat in her small living room, staring out the window with trembling hands. The crickets sang. The moonlight spilled across her floor. She thought about every school lunch she packed, every fever she soothed, every bedtime story she read to a boy who once told her, I'll never leave you, Mommy. And now that boy had turned her into a signature on a page, a liability, a legal inconvenience. Her phone buzzed. A voicemail from Mrs. Dalton. Nathan's at the house. He's trying to get in. He looks confused, maybe angry. I thought you should know. Madison didn't hesitate. She packed a single bag, buttoned her coat, and took the next train back. She was tired of hiding. She found him on the porch, pacing like a man who'd lost something, but wasn't sure when it had slipped through his fingers. He didn't see her at first. She stood at the edge of the sidewalk, heart pounding. Then she stepped forward. He turned. His face lit up in false relief. Mom, where have you been? I've been trying to get in. You changed the locks, remember, she said. His smile faltered. I thought you weren't coming back. No, she said. You hoped I wasn't coming back. He looked down at the doorknob. It's not opening. What's going on? What's going on, she said slowly, is that I know everything. His head snapped up. What? I know you forged my signature. I know you filed the deed while I was unconscious. I know you told the doctors I was confused. I know about the strangers you brought here. The showings. The plans. The lies. His mouth opened. Closed. Then, I can explain no. You can't. There's no explanation. You saw me sick, scared, barely able to stand, and instead of helping me, you saw an opportunity. His eyes burned. I was trying to protect you. She took a step closer. No, you were trying to replace me. He laughed bitterly, defensive. You don't understand what it's like. Watching you fade. Watching you struggle. I wasn't struggling, she said sharply. You just wanted me quiet. You wanted a smooth exit. One signature, and poof, I'm gone, and you get the house. He turned his face away, jaw clenched. But I didn't disappear, she whispered. I survived. Silence stretched between them, thick with years of disappointment. Then she said the final thing he didn't expect. I've already filed everything. The deed is voided. The fraud is documented. And the house? It's locked tighter than a safe. You will never own this place. Not even a wall. Not even a brick. His voice rose, desperate. You think I was trying to hurt you? I know you were. She looked around, drinking in the place she once called home. And I can't live here anymore. Because it's tainted. By you. He looked stricken. Where are you going? I'm already gone, she said simply. She turned to walk away. Mom, wait. She stopped at the edge of the street and looked back one last time. You thought I'd be too weak. Too grateful. Too old to notice what you were doing. But I was watching. I've always been watching. And with that, she walked away, past the house, past the mailbox, past the boy who once called her mommy and now stood blinking in the ruins of his plan. She didn't look back again. Some wounds don't heal. Some betrayals don't get closure. But some women, some mothers, find the strength to write their own endings. Madison had hoped that silence would be enough. That taking back her house, cutting the legal ties, and disappearing to a quiet corner of Suska would put an end to her son's obsession with what was never his to begin with. But sons like Nathan don't grieve the loss of their mothers. They grieve the loss of control. And Nathan, who had built a fragile empire in his mind, one where she conveniently faded from existence, was not prepared for her refusal to vanish. The calls began subtly. At first, voicemails masked in forced concern. Hey, Mom, I just want to talk. Can you call me back? You didn't have to get lawyers involved. We're family. But soon, the mask cracked. You're making this worse than it needs to be. Everything I did for you. You're old. You need help. Then came the rage. You're not getting away with this. You ruined everything. I swear to God, you'll regret this. And with those words, the air in her little cottage shifted. The soft mornings in Suska grew heavier. The safety she had built felt suddenly too fragile, too paper-thin. Madison sat frozen on her small floral love seat, the phone trembling in her hand. It didn't feel like a son reaching out anymore. It felt like a warning. The next morning, she brought her phone and every printed transcript of his threats to the local police department. An officer, a woman not much younger than Nathan, sat across from her and took it all down with quiet focus. You did the right thing, the officer said. You're not overreacting. This is serious. Madison nodded, lips pressed tight. I know what it looks like, but I also know what it is. My son wants me afraid. And for a while, I was. But not anymore. The emergency restraining order was filed within 48 hours. But legal protection didn't warm the nights. Madison had spent a lifetime loving a boy who now saw her as something to be erased. What haunted her more than the voicemails was the memory of his little fingers clutching hers at the grocery store, his sleepy whispers after nightmares, the macaroni art he once made that she kept on the fridge for years. How does that little boy become this man? Her hands still shook when she buttoned her coat to leave the house. She checked locks twice, sometimes 3 times. Her heart raced when the phone rang, even when it was just Vera, her new friend and next-door neighbor. Vera noticed. One morning, she gently took Madison's hand over tea. "You don't have to go through this alone." "I raised him," Madison whispered. "I loved him." Vera didn't say, "I know." She said, "And that love doesn't excuse what he's done to you." Later that week, another call came from Mrs. Dalton. "He's back at the house, Madison. Your house. He's walking around the porch, trying the windows." He looked angry. The words hit Madison like a fist to the chest. But this time, she didn't panic. She stood, grabbed her bag, and called Vera and Jean. "We're going with you," Jean said. "You're not going back there alone." Vera drove. Jean packed snacks as if they were heading on a road trip and not toward a confrontation. Madison sat in the back seat, eyes on the road, her heartbeat a quiet thunder in her ears. When they pulled into the neighborhood, the memories came flooding back: Christmas lights, sidewalk chalk, the creak of the porch swing Albert built for her. And then she saw him. Nathan, her son, pacing in front of the house like a ghost who couldn't find his way home. His face twisted when he saw her. "So you do remember where you live?" Madison stepped out of the car, shoulders back. "I never forgot. I was pushed out." He stormed forward. "You have no idea what you've done." "I know exactly what I've done," she said. "I've protected myself. From you." He scoffed. "You turned my friends against me. You poisoned the lawyers. You think this house matters? You think this stupid house is more important than your own son?" She looked at him long and hard. "No," she said, "but I am." His eyes widened. "You never wanted the house," she continued. "You wanted me gone. You wanted to make my life small enough to fit inside a file folder. But I am still here, breathing, standing, watching." He took a step closer. But so did Vera and Jean. "You need to leave," Jean said, voice sharp. "Or I'll call the cops again," Vera added. "And this time, you won't walk away." Nathan's face cracked. He was no longer the calm manipulator. Just a furious man-child watching his illusion fall apart. "You think you're the victim," he growled. "I was. But not anymore." And with that, Madison turned her back to him and walked up the porch stairs, her friends flanking her, her spine straight, her fear burned to ash. He didn't follow. He just stood there, watching her take back the one thing he thought she would surrender without a fight: her self-respect. Weeks passed since that final confrontation. Nathan never returned to the house. He didn't call, didn't write. The restraining order remained in place, and Madison never revoked it. Some days, she still woke up expecting her phone to ring, expecting the familiar pang of hope. Maybe this time he'll apologize. Maybe this time he'll come back different. But the calls never came. And over time, the silence stopped hurting. She realized something she had never allowed herself to say out loud: maybe it's better this way. It wasn't just the betrayal that ended their relationship. It was the years of emotional distance, the way he had twisted her kindness into weakness, the subtle mockery of her age, the manipulation wrapped in concern, the gaslighting that made her question her own mind. Love, Madison had come to understand, is not unconditional when it becomes unsafe. A mother's heart may be wide, but it is not meant to be broken repeatedly in the name of family. She walked through the house now without fear. She planted flowers again, repainted the door, reclaimed her bedroom with new curtains and new light. Vera and Jean visited often. The lawyer became a trusted friend. Mrs. Dalton wrote long, gossipy letters. Madison wasn't just surviving, she was living. And one crisp morning, Standing in her kitchen with the sun pouring through the windows, she whispered aloud, "I did the right thing." She knew now that it wasn't selfish to protect herself. It wasn't cruel to walk away from someone who tried to erase her. It was brave. And if she had any advice for women like her, women who had given everything to a child who took too much, it would be this: you are not a failure for letting go of someone who hurt you. You are not unloving for drawing a boundary. And you are never too old to start again, wiser and freer than before. Madison kept a photo of Nathan from his childhood tucked in a drawer, not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder that she had once raised a boy with love and that love had always been real. What he chose to do with it was no longer her burden to carry.